Welcome, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. Just so you know, it's not siesta time. We have a panel about to begin, but welcome. I appreciate that everyone just ate lunch and welcome back. I do want to just make a quick comment about the convening power of NGIC. When you look through this list and you show it to other folks, people are shocked at the quality of people that attend these events and what they participate and add. And I just think that we ought to give a round of applause to the NGIC folks, because the convening power of NGIC is really outstanding. The other thing I do want to say is happy 2026. I'm wishing you a year of renewed commitment to refiring every day. I think that's important. Great health and profound joy. And optimism, because in this period of time, we need to constantly refire and we need to constantly be optimistic. We have a very important session today. It's not a secret that multilateralism is in crisis. I think we've heard that every 5 minutes this morning, but this is about multilateralism and the climate emergency building. And if you saw the subtext, it's about building the momentum from Baku to Belém, and then on to Turkey as well. So the intent of the Baku to Belém and then to Turkey roadmap was to design a path to the $1.3 trillion annually of climate finance needed for developing countries by 2035. Think about that in the scheme of what we've been able to do. But it fell way short of agreeing on real substantive actions. Obviously, that is a critical issue in its own right, but also symptomatic of the deeper problem that we are tackling in this panel and we've been tackling all day, really, namely the weakness of the multilateral cooperation and action addressing this panel, addressing the urgent challenge of climate change. We are witnessing a crisis of multilateralism. It almost seems ridiculous for me to restate that. And we are already, I believe, in a state of climate emergency. And these two crises, of course, intersect. A weakened multilateral system undermines our ability to build the collaborative responses needed to tackle climate change, and the impacts of climate change risk exacerbate international tensions and further weaken global cooperation. So the risk of a negative feedback loop between these two crises is very high. They feed around each other over and over again. At the same time, it's not without hope. And someone mentioned that this morning. Hope is a choice, and we need to make it. It's not without hope. We do have options to breathe new life into our collaboration on climate change and to build new coalitions of action. We've got an esteemed group of panelists. We're aiming to be done in 55 minutes at the end of the coffee break, so then you can race out and get coffee. I'm going to give 7 or 8 minute overview just to make sure we're all together on some of the data on climate change. And then I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to make some comments and perhaps respond to a question. So let me start with multilateralism. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the multilateral system is in a state of crisis, as you've all been saying all morning long. The rules-based order is under severe strain. Rules are invoked when they align with national interest and discarded when they don't. We've seen evidence of that repeatedly. This is a recipe for conflict and disorder. Meanwhile, strategic rivalry dominates global diplomacy. I'm beginning to wonder, where are the diplomats in the world right now? This makes compromise harder and turns multilateral fora into arenas for posturing rather than problem solving. And I think we could all tick off examples of posturing as opposed to problem solving. In turn, international institutions are losing authority. Bodies like the UN and WTO are still indispensable, I believe, but their ability to enforce decisions or resolve disputes has weakened. The WTO dispute settlement system is effectively paralyzed, and I don't need to make any comments about the UN Security Council. These issues predated the US's retreat into unilateralism. Let me just make that comment. But have only been made more challenging as the US withdraws its support from critical international treaties like the UNFCCC. Finally, developing powers and middle powers feel underrepresented and unheard in multilateral fora. Evident inequities, I believe, especially on climate development and debt, have weakened buy-in and frayed consensus. So let me turn to the climate emergency, and I think it's important for us all to be on the same page on this. Fundamentally, we're way off track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. Global warming is predicted now to be 2.8 degrees Celsius based on policies currently in place, based on the most recent UNEP emissions gap report. A considerable improvement, for sure, on the 4 degrees Celsius trajectory before Paris, but it's still a world that would experience exceptionally severe and destabilizing climate impacts. And for now, the world has its foot on the fossil accelerator, especially in the US, not the climate brake. And global carbon emissions from fossil fuels are projected to have risen by 1.1% in 2025, reaching a record high. That's 38 to 40 billion tons of CO2 equivalent related to fossil fuel. That also means that the remaining carbon budget to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is virtually exhausted. It's now a mere 170 billion tons of CO2, equivalent to 4 years at the 2025 emissions levels. In effect, no one wants to say it starkly, but that 1.5 degrees Celsius target is all but dead. We all know that, and we better start talking about it as dead. The question now is to what extent we can limit the overshoot. So let's talk about the nexus of multilateralism and climate. As these two crises collide and intersect, the implications are troubling. I was at COP30 in Belém for a couple of weeks, and despite hopes, the impact of fraying multilateralism was clear every day there, impacting the ability to increase the resolve to action. The effect of the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement was strongly felt, weakening climate leadership and also giving top cover to petrostates to block progress. China failed to step into the leadership vacuum, staying on the sidelines and putting forward an NDC of limited ambition. Even the EU, despite strong climate policy, struggled to lead, given internal challenges, competing priorities, and opposition to its position on CBAM and climate financing. The result was a disappointing set of outcomes. The multilateral COP process simply isn't delivering, and after 30 successive conferences, we still can't even today reach a collective agreement on what we need to do to address the root cause of climate crisis, namely fossil fuels. We saw that too in the delay on the IMO, the International Maritime Organization's net zero framework in October. After years of diplomacy and working on that, we thought it was a done deal, and it wasn't. The US and Saudi jumped in, voted against it. We're going to have another vote at the end of this year. The soonest it can come into play is March of 2028. In short, at a time when the world needs ambitious climate leadership and strong collaborative responses, the multilateral order is proving itself to be weak, divided, and unable to deliver. So where do we go from here? That all sounds bleak. And remember, I wish you all optimism in 2026, so I want to come to that. That's because it's important to be clear-eyed on the challenges we face. But reality doesn't have to be cause for pessimism, more a prompt to action. That's why I said a renewed commitment for 2026. There is also reason for optimism, and let me give you a few things. First, we shouldn't need, and we don't need, unanimity or consensus to make meaningful progress in climate action. Coalitions of the willing can take on the mantle of leadership, even if processes like COP remain stalled or slow. There are examples of coalitions of the willing that are out there. The two of the most promising outcomes from discussions at Belém, the agreement by Colombia and the Netherlands to host the first international conference on the just transition away from fossil fuels, and Brazil's Tropical Forest Forever Facility initiative were exactly these kinds of coalitions going forward. Plurilateralism, which in China, I was in China in December and spoke about the need for effective plurilateralism, which is really, in my mind, organizing around a common goal as opposed to a common organization. And I searched long and hard for a term that might recognize that, and that is variable geometry. And somewhere in there is a role for the UN. Secondly, and I think this is the most important point, we are entering a new economic reality with fundamental implications for the energy transition. We've now arrived at a juncture where renewables are staggeringly cheap. Renewables are staggeringly cheap. They offer the most economic power in nearly every corner of the world. Solar, onshore wind, and battery costs are down 90%, 70%, and 89% since 2010. Meanwhile, the cost of building a coal, gas, or nuclear plant is even higher than it was 30 years ago. We've passed, and it's important for all of us to understand this, we've passed the tipping point where green power beats fossil fuel alternatives purely on cost, even accounting for intermittency. Critically, this will increase the drive for decarbonization, if only out of economic self-interest. It's going to earn you more to engage in green energy than to continue to use fossil fuel. Done deal. We've got a lot of research on that. Nations and companies alike will recognize that the energy transition is a huge opportunity to make profitable investments, to capture new and growing markets, to reduce energy costs, and to build more secure and reliable energy systems. In turn, this opens up huge opportunities for public-private partnerships. So if politics can't do it for us, economics might win the game. And finally, thirdly, we may be able to look to new sources of climate leadership. For all of its delivery challenges, Pelham did show climate commitment from Brazil and highlighted that leadership may increasingly come from the global south. And even if China isn't leading on COP or in climate commitments, it is leading on action. It is well on the way to becoming the world's first electrostate, adding astonishing and unprecedented levels of renewable capability in recent years. Renewables only represent 35% of energy generation in China, but last year it represented only over 50% of what they added. China added more energy from wind and solar capacity than the rest of the world combined. And I'll give you this note, because this is something that we've been looking at carefully. And listen, China last year earned more from the export of green energy technology than the U.S. earned from the export of oil and gas. And the U.S. is the leading exporter of oil and gas. Think about how that tips everything. That is a tipping point in the economics of energy. So finally, I'm confident that ambitious targets such as the 1.3 trillion climate financing goal don't have to remain distant aspirations. I won't steal Havez's thunder, because he's our finance expert here on the panel and he has some interesting things to say. But we need to persist in looking at appropriate financing. So I'll conclude with traditional multilateralism is clearly failing us on climate, but new coalitions of action and new approaches can still deliver going forward. So with that, I wanted to give you just some framing, not on multilateralism, because everybody in this room is a bigger expert on multilateralism than me, but on climate and the data related to climate and the work we're doing on renewables. So with that, I'm going to turn to President Vejonis here next to me. And how we're going to do this is it's going to talk for 5, 6, 7 minutes and then maybe take a question.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
So there's a line in the sand and I have a hook behind here,
Okay.
but they're all in agreement.
Mr. Chairman, let me start one very honest. Sorry. Let me start with one honest observation. We already know what needs to do on climate. The real question is how we do it together, whether we do it fast enough. Because climate change is global, and of course, our responses are still too fragmented. That is why multilateralism today is not about diplomacy for diplomacy's sake. It is about delivery. And when we speak about multilateralism and climate emergency, I want to underline 4 key messages. First key message, multilateralism must deliver, not just agree. It means that from European, even from Latvian perspective, we strongly believe in rules-based cooperation, but rules alone don't reduce emissions or protect communities. Agreements only matter if they survive the flight home from COP. We have Baku, we have Brazil COPs, and continuity is very critical. Continuity of ambitions, continuity of finance, continuity of trust, and multilateralism must stop being a sequence of events and start acting like a continuous system of action. It means that success of multilateralism is not what we agree on, but it is what actually changes. The key message too, I would like to say, is climate finance is about fairness, not charity, because climate finance is often discussed in numbers, but on the ground, it's about access, speed, and fairness, and equitable transition means adaptation is funded, not sidelined. Smaller countries and communities are not locked out by complexity, and finance supports long-term transformation, not short-term fixes. From Europeans' experience, we know that predictability matters. Without it, planning fails, the trust erodes. It means that climate finance is not charity, it is investment in shared stability. Key message 3, inclusion is accelerator of climate action. I think one of the greatest weaknesses of global climate governance is not ambitions, it is ownership. When climate policies are perceived as externally imposed, elite-driven, or detached from everyday life, they lose legitimacy. If climate solutions are designed without youth, women, and communities, they will be resisted or they will fail, because youth bring urgency, women bring resilience, communities bring realism. Inclusive diplomacy is not symbolic, it is how ambition becomes implementation. It is how ambitions becomes implementation. Inclusion does not slow climate action, it makes it stick. The next thing I think that COP outcomes must connect to SDGs and national action. Every COP produces outcomes, but impact only happens when those outcomes are embedded in national development plans, aligned with the SDGs, translated into budgets, institutions, accountability. From smaller countries' perspective, alignment is not optional, it is essential. We simply cannot afford parallel systems that don't talk to each other. It means that climate ambition succeeds when global goals meet national capacity. And when we again look from Baku through Brazil, the challenge is clear. We don't need louder declarations, but we need stronger bridges between finance and fairness, between inclusion and ambition, between global agreements and national delivery. I think multilateralism must now prove that it can move at the speed of the climate crisis and at the scale that people's lives demand. The world, I think, is waiting for perfect solution. It is waiting for credible collective action, because climate emergency is the ultimate test of multilateralism. And whether we pass, it depends not on what we promise, but on what we make possible. And if multilateralism cannot adapt, the world will adapt without it, and it not always will be in ways what we will like. Maybe it's shortly, because I think it's end this.
Okay. Excellent comments. I do want to build on three things you say with one question. You said that we know what we need to do on climate, but how to do it together is key. You also said that COP outcomes must align with the SDGs. I agree. Very tough. And you also say it's this agreement plus delivery. Bellum was supposed to be about action. So the question I have for you is, COP is the centerpiece of multilateral climate action, but its limitations are pretty clear to those of us who have been attending. Is reform of the COP process possible, and what could that look like?
I would like to say yes, but not by turning it into something it was never designed to be. Because COP is really very good at one thing, bringing every country into the same room and setting global directions, but it is not good at fast execution, and expecting it to be is part of the problem. What would be necessary to change? I think COP should be do less negotiation theater, but more accountable. It means that fewer sprawling agendas, clearer goals, real follow-up. Secondly, I think it should become year-round, because not a once a year sprint when everything happens at 3 a.m. I also was sitting in such COPs, and you want to sleep, but we're still negotiating on that. It means that it's not very effective work. And the third, I think it should separate decision making from delivery. COP would not try to do everything. It should set directions and accountability, then mobilize delivery through institutions that can execute.
Great, thank you very much. COP30 was supposed to be about action and execution, so we have that to come back to, and the role of the private sector if we have time. So I'm going to turn to my friend here on my left, Abdulaziz Altwaijri. Did I manage?
Yes, you did it very well.
Okay, great. I'll turn to you. You have some interesting comments to make here.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, allow me to thank our organizers, the NGIC, for this beautiful high-level meeting. And without NGIC, we would not have had the chance to be together to discuss these issues. And I'm very happy to see many of my friends here in this hall. And we support NGIC to go ahead with its noble mission. This issue is very important, and excuse me for my harsh voice because I'm taking Seretide for the lung infection, and it is now over. I'm very happy to know that. But my concern in this issue is about the role of young people in the issue of the climate change. Youth concern about climate change does reflect an emerging source of climate leadership. Polling across many countries has shown that younger generations consistently report higher levels of worry about climate impact, stronger support for ambitious climate policies, and greater willingness to change personal behavior around sustainability than older cohorts. This trend suggests both a moral and political input, a moral and a political impetus that could shape climate action for decades. But recognizing this potential leadership requires understanding why it matters and how to develop and amplify it effectively. The young generation all over the world worries about the climate change because they worry about the future. Jobs, healthcare, good living, all the things that the generation that came before them or the generation who came before the other generation who came before them enjoyed. The future is gloomy. As you can see now, there are many wars, many conflicts all over the world. Migration because of the wars, migration because of poverty and hardship, migration because of lack of jobs, of good living, of healthcare. So involving the young generation with their ambitions and their capabilities and their understanding also, because the new generation now is very active in the social media, and the cultural gap has been narrowed so rapidly that these groups of young people all over the world communicate and talk to each other in the social media, in the podcasts. Every day I discovered a new thing that is taking place in our world. We don't know about it, but if we sail in this big ocean, we discover very, very strong miracles happening to them. So we have to use this opportunity and utilize and involve this ambitious look by the young generations to be involved also in shaping the future of our world, especially in the issue of energy and the climate change. Unfortunately, the superpowers, mainly the United States and China and Russia and India as well, and some other countries are the worst example of making the atmosphere polluted. And they advise us to take measures to reduce the carbon monoxide problems in our societies. And they blame the poor nations, and they want them to start, and they forget themselves. And I'm sorry to say that, but this is something that you all know. If the United States is in need of oil, while they have abundance of oil in Texas and also from the imports they have from other countries, but why they go to Venezuela and take the oil of Venezuela and they sell it? So we are entering an era of not law and order, but the opposite of law and order, lawlessness. I mean, where the strong can conquer the weak and take his wealth and sell it and say, I can govern you and make your life better. When will you make it better? We don't know. So this is an issue that is related to the agony of the young generation. I come from a part of the world that is suffering from wars. I am from the Middle East, and we have war in Sudan, war in Yemen, war in Libya, instability in Iraq, instability in Syria after the throwing of the Assad regime. Lebanon is still not in its old glory days. The Palestinians are suffering. Egypt is not as strong as it used to be. Saudi Arabia now is getting in a conflict with the United Arab Emirates over the issue of Yemen and the Sudan and Somalia, and because United Arab Emirates now is financing these militias to fight for certain dreams in their minds. The militia in Yemen, the militia in Sudan, the militia in Somalia, the militia even Haftar in Libya. So I come from a part of the world that is plagued with illnesses, and this affects the world, because this is a very important part of the world to energy, because most of the energy that comes from there. Imagine Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Libya, Iran, Iraq. They produce a lot of oil and gas. Qatar. So the young generation in our part of the world and in the world at large, they want to see a better life for themselves. And we have to help them. But how can we help them while we are making problems for them? We are creating wars, we are creating problems, and we are not giving a hand that brings them up from their miseries to a better future. I'm not going to take more than what I have said, because we are allowed to 5 or 6 minutes. I think I talked for 5 minutes now. I think so. But I will take 1 more minute to say that we have to introduce in the curricular system the culture of protecting the environment and how to fight the global warming and the crisis of the usage, the unlawful and crazy usage of energy, fossil energy, and restore and move to green energy that is available and in abundance. In my country and in Africa and in some parts of the Middle East, we have abundance of sun. We have large lands, and we can use solar energy. We can use wind energy, and we can also reduce the usage of fossil energy that is polluting our world. Thank you very much.
It's interesting on your last comment. Well, I'll move on, but I wanted to just build on your comment on youth, because I think it's extremely important. The UNICEF report indicated the polling is that the youth are see this as a high issue to go after. But the British Council survey found that climate change was an important value, but it was second to equality. And I love that, because they're correlated. And that brings us to climate justice. But I'm going to pivot, since we have you here. I'd like to pivot for you to another comment in an area for you to comment on. There's this real dichotomy that is emerging, that many of the states are the most dependent on fossil fuel for their economy. For example, the Middle East, North Africa, but it's also Indonesia and other places in the world. Nigeria are also most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. I was reading the MIT Technology magazine a couple of weeks ago, and it was all about refrigeration and the emissions that are going to be caused by refrigeration in these countries. How can the concerns of states with high levels of oil and gas production and dependence best be addressed, and are there ways to give them more of a stake in the green energy future?
States with high level, states with high levels of oil and gas dependencies are worried about the imposed solutions. They want to create their own solutions that suit their situation. They have to move to green energy gradually and not abruptly like that, because most of their income is from fossil fuel. Most of those countries, I mean, they don't have advanced industry. They don't have other, sources of income other than the fossil energy. And I think we can help them. I will talk about Saudi Arabia, because, this is my country. For the past 9 years, the new leadership has adopted a plan to move to green energy, to widen the scope of using green energy and to reduce the reliance on oil and gas. And now I think maybe 35 to 40% of the Saudi budget is coming from these sources, not from oil. Oil used to be 100%, and now it is not 100%. It is less than that. So this kind of policy, if it is adopted also by other countries like in Indonesia and Nigeria and Iraq, Iran, and Libya is in turmoil. You know, Libya is divided into two countries, one in the east and one in the west. And in between them, there are also other people who are ambitious to have their own independence. And this is very bad for the region, bad for Libya. Any idea that supports dividing a country is a vicious idea. You know, we have to protect the states as they are, help them, and avoid creating, you know, turbulences and problems inside them. And those who feed the separationists and the secessionists, those who want to, you know, cut their country into pieces, they are not good people at all. They don't look for goodness for those people, and they are not really human in themselves. They are creators of problems, creators of animosity and decadence. So moving to this kind of clean energy needs also support. But now, who is going to support who? If the United States is the example, because the most powerful country in the world is giving an example of violating the international law, taking the oil of Venezuela and threatening Greenland to take it also, and maybe they will threaten my country and other countries because they have oil. This is not a democratic and civilized way of behaving. I think it is like the piracy in the old ages, when pirates go in a ship and invade, you know, the islands, wherever they may be, and take the treasures. I think, I'm sorry to say that, but I think Mr. Trump watches a lot of the Caribbean pirates. And it is affecting his mentality. Because, you know, we have to respect the international law. If the international law is broken, there will be no peace in the world. Because the international law is the guarantor of making us together, respecting each other, and behaving as civilized people. If we throw this international law away, then we will be animals in a jungle. The strong will eat the weak.
Okay.
So, excuse me, with just 1 second. This is the responsibility of the superpowers to give the example, to lead the people around the world, other countries, to the safety in the future. Without that, there will be no example to lead other peoples. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. Mamuna, whom everybody in here knows, has called me out repeatedly about green energy. She said, we're in Malaysia. If you force us to go green, jobs decline, growth declines. I challenged her back. The green jobs are actually more prolific than oil and gas jobs because they've been so mechanized. And growth, if you let oil and gas grow, it perpetuates the green premium, which we know is not a valid economic asset. The other point I would just make, all the technology, and Saudi is a perfect example. I've been going there for years. It's great technology. The ability to convert trillions of dollars of oil and gas assets to other purposes. We looked at a coal plant to try to convert it to green hydrogen. Europe built all of these terminals, 20-some terminals, to produce gas, when in fact, they could have done the same thing, but also made it easy to convert to green hydrogen. So just add that. If you want to take a quick comment back. We have time, guys. We're on track.
Of course, you know, if you use your wealth, I mean, if a country is a wealthy country, if they don't use their wealth to develop their country and find solutions for their own problems, then who will do it for them? Nobody will do it for them, especially at this time of our world, where all the countries are suffering, you know, hardship from economic, you know, problems and many other problems in our region, as I said, wars and migration and all that sort of thing. But, using your wealth that you accumulated from oil and gas selling to make your country stronger, more modernized, and less dependent on fossil energy, that's a good thing. But not to spend your money to create militias to fight other people and destroy and ruin their countries. And this is what is happening right now. We have to be very frank. Many wealthy people, many wealthy countries are doing this, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to turn to Hafez Ghanem. And I would just say, I haven't introduced the titles of folks because you can read them, but I do want to emphasize he's an economist. And just like I think we need more private sector in these meetings, I think having an economist, I know Ngozi is an economist as well, but having an economist speak, he's a fellow at Brookings. And I just, by way of introduction, wanted to make sure people understood that. Interesting perspective.
Thank you, Jean, and I hope people won't hold my being an economist against me. But I'm going to try to give you a message of hope for 2026. The international financial architecture for climate is completely broken. However, we can still find a solution, find a way. And let me explain now why I'm saying that. Actually, this morning, when Volkan said we are trying to solve a 21st century problem with a 20th century system, I felt that he's exactly right, or I couldn't have said it better. And this is what is happening with the international financial architecture of today. So I did not go to Belem for COP30, but I read very carefully the roadmap to $1.3 trillion that is supposed to be that are needed by developing countries to deal with climate. And I have to say, when I read it, I wanted to cry because it is a very unrealistic document. And let me give you just a few numbers so that you understand why I think it's unrealistic. So in order to achieve the 1.3 trillion, we need bilateral official development assistance to climate, which in 2023 was $67 billion, to rise to $235 billion. Is this realistic? At a time when official development assistance last year has fallen by 17%, at a time when the United States has closed US aid, at a time when Germany, France, the UK have cut their aid budgets dramatically. In order to reach 1.3 trillion, according to that document also, private investment in climate has to rise from 40 billion to 850 billion. Inshallah. Today, net private financing to developing countries is negative. So this is just to give you a background of, if you look, just forget the words and look at the numbers and analyze them and see if this makes sense. Okay, so the numbers look completely, how can I say, optimistic, very, very optimistic. But also, if you look at the political realities, you'll feel that those numbers are even far-fetched. I talked about the falling ODA. Europeans are spending more on defense, so they're cutting ODA. Americans decided that Mr. Trump does not like ODA, and he even went a step further, just closed down USAID altogether. And we expect that we'll get more financing from those countries for climate. When Mr. Trump at the United Nations said that climate change is the greatest hoax when in Europe we have the rise in populist parties that are anti-climate action. So it is really not realistic at all in this current framework. People then say, okay, World Bank, the multilateral development banks. No way. The World Bank, the United States has a virtual veto. I worked for 30 years at the World Bank. For the last 7 years as vice president, spending 3 days, 3 mornings every week with the board of directors. And if the United States executive director says, I do not want the bank to finance climate, the bank will not finance climate. During the first Trump administration, we were not even allowed to mention Paris Agreement in any of our reports. Look at the last World Bank IMF annual meetings in October of 2025. And look at all the official meetings, there isn't a single one on climate financing. Therefore, this will not happen. So I believe that we really, this was the pessimistic part of my presentation. Another pessimistic part of my presentation is that we have an international financial architecture for climate that's totally uncoordinated. Other than World Bank, the different bilaterals and so on, there is nearly 100 climate funds in the world that finance a total of less than $2 billion a year. We're talking trillions, and I have 100 climate funds. So everybody, every organization, every country or whatever, are creating a small climate fund to finance their pet projects, basically. And they are totally uncoordinated and not working together. So what do I suggest? And why is this system so broken? First of all, if you want the countries that are suffering most from climate are the developing countries, especially Africa. You need to give them more voice in the international financial architecture. Mehdi said this morning that the realities when he was talking about the multilateral system does not reflect the realities of the ground. Actually, the international financial architecture is even worse. I'll give you just 2 examples. India's economy is way larger than the UK's economy. The UK's voice in the international financial architecture is 4.23%. India's is 2.75%. Okay? Africa has 54 countries, 1.4 billion people. It has the same voice as one country, Japan. Okay, Japan has the same voice as all of Africa. Now, China has a bigger economy than the UK, Japan, Germany combined. But it doesn't even have half of the voice of those countries combined. So there is an issue of voice, of having a system that was created at Bretton Woods in 1944, 45, and does not reflect today's realities, as Mehdi was saying. So I don't think that you can change that. It's a bit like you cannot change the existing institutions. It's a bit like the reform of the Security Council. I mean, Switzerland has double the voice of Nigeria. Okay, Nigeria has 225 million people. Switzerland has, I forgot, 8.8 million people. And Switzerland has double the voice of Nigeria. So if you want to equalize all of the stuff, you'll have to reduce Switzerland's weight to give more to Nigeria. Will the Swiss agree? So my solution is to go back to what some other people were saying this morning about
Plurilateral.
yeah, it's it's very difficult to pronounce this. Multilateralism is easier than plurilateralism. So what I think the solution, so that is one problem is there. The other problem of our system, so is that we have, it is too dependent on public funding. So you have a system that is based on only money coming from budgets. And you have a system that is governed by politicians, basically. But the world has changed. Amr talked to us this morning about the international NGOs, international civil society. We need to have civil society. I mean, when I was sitting at the board of the World Bank, every executive director is defending his country's or her country's interests. If you want to talk about financing for climate, you need directors who are defending the planet's interests. Now, we're saying that we need to mobilize all this private money, $850 billion. There isn't a single private sector person in the governance of those institutions. Not a single private sector person. So this system is not fit for purpose, is not fit for financing climate in the 21st century. Now, the solution. First of all, close all of those climate funds. Only keep 3 or 4. There's one big one, the Green Climate Fund of the United Nations, and maybe 1 or 2 others, and close everything else. You have to stop funding them since, or let them die slowly. We need to create a new institution. I call it an International Green Bank. A new institution that would be a public-private institution that will be funded by the private sector, by private companies, by governments, and by big foundations and civil society. And that will be governed by the private representatives of the private sector, representatives of civil society, as well as representatives of government. Very different type of organization from the post-World War II system, very different type. As an organization that will not be getting money from budgets, but will be raising money from the market. An organization that will not be lending to governments, but will be financing private projects, private green projects. As Jean was saying, most of those projects are profitable anyhow, on their own. So we don't need government to finance them. So now, I've been talking about this for the last 2 years. And there is a knee-jerk reaction of saying, no way. We don't need another international body. And I understand that. Actually, I understand that there is a proliferation of international institutions and so on. However, if you think about it, you need something different now if you really believe that climate is a big issue. And now, so there is no way that you'll get a unanimity among the countries of the world to create a green bank. So, but that's where the plurilateralism comes in, and getting a few countries with a few private companies, with a few civil society organizations, starting something small, but leaving the door open for others to join. So this is my optimistic part. If you all agree, we can do it together tomorrow.
So we have just 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah, go ahead and applaud. But 3 or 4 minutes. I want to come back to this issue and we'll be on time. But I've read your paper. It's excellent. If you haven't read it, you should read it. The idea of an international green bank, here's the concern I'd like your reaction to, is how you divvy up the money, how you determine who gets what. And that's why having it framed as a public-private partnership, the private sector is interested in returns, and we need to incentivize investment with maybe debt relief, maybe tax incentives, long-term guarantees for offtake agreements, et cetera. But if you look at the funds that are out there, some of them have money, but they haven't given it out. So how you divvy out the money has to be based on private sector returns. Just a comment, and then we'll close up.
Yeah, no, but I think that it has to be a mix of looking at the private and public returns. I mean, when look at some of the look at something like IFC today that finances private sector projects in developing countries. You need two criteria to get an IFC project. One is that it is privately, it has private returns. It's a profitable proposition. And two, that it is socially impactful, that it is contributing to development. Green Bank would do the same thing. It has to be, since we said we are not going to lend to governments, so it means that it has to be a profitable project. And we want the private sector to be on the board on governing it to make sure that those wasteful bureaucrats are not throwing money away. But at the same time, it has to be contributing to climate reduction.
Just to close on a positive note, the ITA, the Industrial Transition Authority that Mark Carney and the president of COP28 developed, there is a pipeline of projects out there, and there is money out there if it meets returns. So with that, it's the end of, I'm not going to take a question because it opens the door. Greenpeace? Okay, all right, good suggestion. We can take that offline at coffee because we just finished the coffee break, but we're going to allow 10 minutes for you to get a coffee and come back. We're on time. Thank you very much for your attention.